welcome back to the Xenothesis podcast. This is episode 35, in which we're covering chapter 9 of part 2 Phoenix of... Is it part 2 or part 3?
Part 2.
Part 2, yeah, part 2 Phoenix of Adulthood-Rites, the second book in the Xenogenesis trilogy by Octavia Butler. My name is Richard Akin, and I'm joined in this interesting new little town that we've been anticipating visiting for a little while now, by my co-host.
Michael Glinka. Hi, everyone. I mean, my previous predictions kept going back and forth, going, oh, we're going to reach Phoenix? No, we're not going to reach Phoenix yet. Oh, we're going to reach Phoenix? No, we're going to reach Phoenix yet.
Yeah, we kind of yo-yoed a little bit on that one, didn't we? But
yeah.
Finally here, in the eponymous location for the section.
To be fair, I mean, like, in my defense, even the chapter starts with with the men saying that, they were sort of avoiding the village. So in a way, I was correct. I was anticipating their behavior.
It made sense that we were kind of putting off visiting here and going around the houses to find somewhere where we might be able to unload our kidnap victim. Before going back to the place where we know he has ties.
True, especially with the after what he did to Tino. Exactly.
Yeah. Probably want to avoid Phoenix. So as a last resort, we finally showed up here. But it's been a little while since we last recorded because we both took summer holidays.
Finally change of environment, not being stuck at home non-stop. Bit more refreshed, but still no motivation to do work. So standard.
Oh dear. No. And I don't know if it might be a little divergence in the initial part here. I'm ad-libbing, but. Consumed some other content in the intervening time.
Go on.
Not, I read the first of the Parables books, some other Octavia's work, and started on the second, and they're also very good and quite interesting. Not as relevant in some ways to like the biological sciencey stuff that we do, but interesting in other ways. I can see why they had a resurgence in popularity after the 2016 election in the US. There's some somewhat prophetic stuff in there in some regards.
Actually, speaking of the prophetic stuff, I actually sat down and started reading Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. I actually finally went to sit down and start reading the book because we often mention it, and I know the sort of overlying theme behind it, but I actually never sat down and read it. So it's really.
How far have you gotten so far?
Only just the beginning. I'm only at the very beginning because I only just recently you know what, I want to read something, and I thought, you know what, I've been postponing this, so I will do it now. I only started. But it starts really, really like that's really interesting concept that they started with the what's his name, the idea of budding oocytes.
It's
to make clones.
Bernard's the protagonist, right? Yeah, and then Bokanovskification, I think, is the process they call it.
Yes. To make many twins of the same, so they do all the same job. It's like. This is a concept I can imagine somebody, for example, in America or China coming out like, this is, let's do this.
Yeah, it's like, how can we make these Amazon warehouse workers more efficient and predictable?
Oh my god. Oof. But to be fair, this is a serious issue, and I mean, I can imagine every single Amazon worker was hoping that Jeff Bezos is gonna get stuck in the space when he goes flies there, but hey.
You recommended an anime to me last week because I'm looking for additional avenues by which I can become more of a nerd, and anime is about the only thing left.
Yes, that's probably the deepest sea you can throw yourself into. But go on.
So I watched Violet Evergarden.
And
it was beautiful, as you said.
It's honestly. Did you just watch like the season, or did you manage to just binge everything?
I looked up the watch order and did the whole thing. So
Oh, really?
I put in the OVA between episodes 4 and 5, I think, when it was supposed to be.
Oh, wow, okay. So I have only watched like the season, and I think I watched one movie. I need to rewatch everything, zip it. But yes, it's beautiful, isn't it? It's just the animation, like you can tell.
The animation is absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
Just there's so many like beautiful little details, like the use of reflective surfaces.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've never seen animated time lapse before, and they did that several times.
Yeah.
And like, you know, water and all kinds of detail. It's just like, and things like little like bodily expressions, just, you know, the way people do things, and it's absolutely visually stunning.
Yeah,
so,
it's I think so far like the most visually satisfying animation to date.
I mean, the story left me with a number of questions.
Okay,
but it was still very enjoyable.
If I give me one of those questions, go on.
So, like, spoiler warnings for Violet Evergarden with respect to like what may or may not be answered in the plot from now on, right? Just to anyone who wants to watch it in the future.
Yes.
So, it's still pretty unclear to me Violet's origins, right?
Okay.
It's I still don't understand like how she became this kind of like super soldier at like a 10-year-old. You know, we only see her when what's his name, the brother like gives her to the major, and that's like okay, but where did the brother get her from in the first place? Like, in the north. It's like, so her kind of deep background still remains kind of
I guess
very much unanswered to me.
I need to check because I don't know if it's based on on light novel. Maybe
it's a light novel.
Yeah, so maybe there's more details, because the problem with animation often is that like they have to skip certain parts because if you put everything details, you're gonna like there's not enough time. So I guess
I may have to go to the source material to get my questions answered.
Yeah.
on the deep background, but and I managed to do the setting incredibly well. Like all of the little details for. Just like to get the impression of it being in like a kind of World War I era period, like cloth and wood framed planes, and like the guns. Like so, there's a few scenes where there's action stuff. It's not very much action, but like they clearly have like it's like a P14 Enfield rifle that they modeled the one off of that all the guys are in like the World War I style trenches. It's got a very distinct like top piece above the inline magazine. And all of these little things, like okay, that really pegs the period fairly exactly, and it's really well done in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I like I always was big fan of the sort of steampunk idea of like this usage of because Violet doesn't have hands, and
those arms are amazing,
those arms are just like I always was very big fan of stuff like this. I mean like I mentioned that before because of Star Wars things, like when Luke Skywalker has his hand chopped off and they give him this bionic arm in a way. So I absolutely love
it's kind of it's one of very few aspects of the world that kind of strike you as being like odd, right? Because having an above the elbow amputation that has that level of dexterity would be extremely difficult. Basically impossible even with modern tech, but this kind of like clockwork like thing works okay for Violet.
No, it's
like that, and the fact that she's as much of a super soldier as she is, like the two things that are kind of like this doesn't quite fit. But other than that, the world seems very, very like believable as kind of a moderately idealized 1910s era Europe.
Yeah. If I can suggest to you another thing before we move on, you should definitely watch a movie from Ghibli Studio, animated movie, Nausica.
Okay.
And I mean, Ghibli movies in general are fantastic, and they're deep and they tell many stories. But I personally find, although Kiki delivery service is very cute and very relaxing, and I really love it, but I think the best movie out of all of the Hideo Miyazaki's creations is Nausica, because it's really, he based it after his experience of the mercury poisoning of I don't remember exactly where it was, but somewhere in Japan there was a mercury poisoning of like a local like environment because of factory leak or something. I don't remember exactly, but it really influenced his view of the world and his like the necessity to take care of our environments and make sure that things like this don't happen. And it's a fantastic movie. The story, the characters, it's just the drawing is so. It's an old movie, but it's fantastic. 100%, you should really watch it.
Okay, I'll have to look it up. Right, so we've immediately diverged.
Yes, I mean
entirely my fault onto a tangent about anime because we haven't spoken in a little while, so we're catching up on air here now. But
let's start maybe with the prediction.
Shall we?
Yes.
To the after the tone beep, no more like Violet Evergarden spoilers. We're back.
Yes.
Let's revisit your prediction for this chapter and get started on the summary.
So my chapter 9 prediction was the men reach another village. Maybe finally Phoenix, but it might still be too soon. Potentially Damek or Galt try to do something stupid to the boy and a brutal fight starts between the men. I thought basically there's something's gonna trigger Galt or Damek and like the men are gonna, there's gonna be infighting again between them. Completely missed the spot.
Okay.
Completely missed it, but hey.
I mean, we are finally at Phoenix.
Yes.
And we don't yet have any infighting. Presumably because we're now at somewhere where they need to present a somewhat united front.
Yes. Well then, I think let's start the chapter 9 summary. After the long off-tangent topic. So, we're finally in Phoenix. The chapter starts with an explanation on why it took the resistors and Akin so long to get to that village. The reason was basically because they were avoiding it, knowing that it was Tino's village. They were aware that probably the Oankali will check it first and stay as long as possible to catch them if they aim to that to reach that village straight away after the abduction. We're given a bit of a description about Phoenix, more than what Tino gave us in a few chapters back. Phoenix was the richest resistor village they knew of. People from the village would salvage metal from the pre-war sites. That was told by Tino to us. And there were people in the village who were able to shape the metal. It also had more women than any other village because they traded them for metal.
That's actually an interesting point because... firstly, I mean, it tells us that there is some remnants of pre-war stuff lying around, at least enough that there are some metal fragments. And it also suggests quite a high degree of metalworking skill, because working modern alloys is often quite difficult.
Yeah.
You need high temperatures and so on that you can not attain easily for like a mild steel or some old iron stuff. You just need a forge, but some of the modern,
especially all the alloys, cobalt alloys,
high melting point stuff.
Yeah. It makes sense that and actually, to be fair, they explain some other stuff here, because like things like they have the cotton, they had rubber trees, as well as trees that produced oil that was used in lamps without the necessity of the refinement, meaning that potentially they had a source of fire that could reach the temperatures necessary for shaping the metal. So
a nice clean burning oil would be a useful thing to have. And that sounds like an Oankali addition, because
it does.
I've not looked it up, but I'm not familiar with any plant that will produce like an oil that you can burn completely unrefined and just like tap the way you would syrup.
It must have been some Oankali modification, I guess, so that to prevent people to...
That's the thing people want to do, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess it's to prevent people from looking for oil again and just destroying the environment again.
I suppose that might be one thing. Perhaps. Yeah, it isn't. Yeah, it's a good question actually. Why would the Oankali make a plant that produces an oil that you can burn when they don't really need any
oil as such, because they have other
fuel
means.
based? Yeah, they don't use that to generate power. So maybe it's a concession to the humans and their way of life here, or maybe it's they just need the oil for some other thing.
To be fair, I mean, like, it is a high energy storage, right? So it's in a way a useful thing, and if you can like tap a tree like you would tap, I don't know, maple tree for its for its syrup, then it makes absolute sense. And I mean, it's a great idea, to be fair, because if you could, nowadays we have scientists came up with like a few years ago with bacteria that can produce diesel.
Yeah. Well, they've been trying to make that into an industrial thing for ages, haven't they? Like algae and bacteria that you can grow in en masse to produce biofuels.
But it's still a few years
really
ahead. But who knows? Maybe combining the stuff with trees would make sense to be able to tap them, and then. But then again, I feel like if there was a fire in the forest like that, you would have a hell of a day hell of a time to trying to put it down.
Yeah, that would not be a good forest fire.
No, it would be really
it's like a
nasty. Yeah.
Forest fire / oil spill. That's
basically yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Maybe these trees were not a good idea.
Maybe not fully thought through. So the whole village had massive houses, stores, and farms. So it's a really well developed place. And as the raiders said, that it was more like a pre-war town than a place where people had given up on life, right? So because we know that Tino mentioned earlier that like suddenly people started just leaving or committing suicide because they just started giving up on the idea of like living without being able to bear children.
By contrast with the previous couple of villages we visited, it certainly seems like they've made progress here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dalmek mentions that he almost settled there, and we are told that Phoenix was located many days south from Hillman, the German village. And then Iriarte then talked to Akin and told him that the people from Phoenix will buy him, but he shouldn't frighten them. He should talk to them, but only when Iriarte tells him when to do so.
Yeah, he seems to somewhat disregard this advice.
Yeah. I mean,
at least in private, anyway.
I think the boy, as much as his intelligence, sometimes just doesn't get the cues of when to do things, right? But it's, I guess, what do you expect from a 17-month old child?
Although I think he may have been right to ignore Damek's advice here, although we'll have to see in the long term how it pans out. But it seems like Iriarte, yes, sorry, advice here, yeah, which I mean, he has that exchange with Tate and so on that seems to be productive.
Yeah, I mean, but he was lucky that it was the person he talked to, because it's
true.
If it was somebody else, then it wouldn't be. But we'll get to that.
We're jumping ahead.
Yeah. So Akin moved again, and here I sort of skipped, but basically Akin communicated with Iriarte in a way that if Iriarte talked to him and he understood, he would shift around in his arms, confirming that he heard him and to what that he understood. But it's interesting because just only now Iriarte goes to him. Tell me, Nino. Speak to me. I don't want to make a fool of myself. I understand, Akin whispered into his ears. The response made Iriarte hold the boy away from him for a second, then smile. A strange smile, maybe realization that Akin is not a fully human baby. But after a brief moment, he tells Akin that he still looks one of his kids and he doesn't want to give him up. Yeah,
it's an interesting moment. And also, Akin frequently sort of expresses himself in, like, I understand. Is quite a adult way of acknowledging that, right?
Yes.
It's not like he just said, yeah, or, made a noise of assent. He actually, stated, I understand what you've told me, as it were, which is, that's going to give away that he has more intelligence than he may have been letting on, at least to Iriarte thus far.
Absolutely. So, and then Akin does something dangerous. He proceeds to taste Iriarte by pretending to kissing him on the neck. He only could get few cells, but if needed, maybe he could share the genetic code with an Uloi to create another Iriarte.
Yeah, that's an interesting implication, right? If you can just, all you need is a few cells and you can whip up a clone.
But to be fair, I understand why he would do it, because considering, like, although he did scare Galt, who was initially quite fond of Akin, Iriarte seems to be still
Yeah. I think is a bit more reasonable as a human being than some of the others. But yeah, so Galt seemed to be holding him reasonably initially, but then we have this whole interaction over the agouti, and he totally loses the trust there. Because he seems to be concealing his intelligence from the others, and only Galt knows about it. But now Iriarte's reaction to the indication that he's smarter than he perhaps let on is less fraught than Galt's experience there.
Yeah. And you pointed out here, like, the exact extract from the book. You better watch that kid got called from several steps behind. A kiss from him could be the same as kiss from a bushmaster.
Yeah. So I think Galt is still very much on guard and warning about Akin. Right? Akin has made him paranoid by that whole thing with the agouti, which the last episode we talked about it, right? It was like creepy child horror kind of stuff. So I can kind of understand where he's coming from.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, to be fair, I still don't understand Galt's behavior, because he knew that the boy is a construct, right? And he knew that he would be different. The shock that he had in the first place sort of doesn't still justify his complete hatred to the boy. Like, the boy didn't do anything. He only said to Galt, like, why don't you take the man who's dying of an ulcer to an Oankali to save him? And
but I think it's just the mismatch between the sort of expectation that you would intuitively have of something that's visually, externally presenting as like an 18-month-old baby, and the clear intelligence, the fact that he was Mercy killed this animal, and is engaging in sort of slightly deceitful behavior, right? He's concealing the fact that he's this intelligent from the others, which from the perspective of Galt looks like this kind of like scheming devil child thing, right? I can certainly understand how he's got in his head about this, without any kind of context on what we have of Akin's internal monologue, understanding his motivations, right? If you don't have any understanding of Akin's motivations from the outside, he can look a lot more threatening.
No, absolutely. But at the same time, it's been, I don't know how many years or decades they've been on the planet now. They must have had interactions with other construct kids in the trading village, although they are resistors and maybe they kept away, but still, in those many years, I'm certain they must have encountered those kids.
I suppose it depends on how limited their previous interactions have been. But I think that's also part of the point that Akin looks so much like an ordinary human child.
Yeah.
He's not visibly alien in a kind of a sense where you then have if you have an expectation that something is going to act alien, then when it does, it's less off-putting, right? But the fact that he looks so human, I think, is something that they have a lot of difficulty with, because it's a very unthreatening package that then does stuff that's like
that's such a nice compliment. A very unthreatening package.
Yeah, and like the body, the outward shell appearance of this being is like a helpless baby by long established human like biological and cultural sensibilities, and yet it has it's housing an alien intelligence and a capacity to kill things, which I can understand why that is producing paranoia in Galt.
No, absolutely, I understand.
Not to excuse anything about his behavior towards Akin, because he's still being unnecessarily mishandling him and all of the rest of it. It's like and the whole kidnapping him in the first place thing, right?
Yeah, but yeah, as it happened, Galt warned Iriarte not to let him do it, but Iriarte just quietly whispered to Akin that the man had small kids before the war and he shouldn't have frightened him. Akin knew this, but nothing could be done now. Like, he never saw a human baby, so he didn't know how to behave, which is a valid point in here. Like,
Yeah, it's a very good point. Like, he doesn't know how the thing that he looks like would normally behave, and thus can't imitate it.
Exactly.
So it's going to do stuff that's going to be weird for what people would expect.
But yeah, back to the Phoenix now. We're going back to the description of a further description of the village. We're told a bit more about the structure of it, and large houses colored white, blue, or gray, with glass windows that Tino boasted about, broad fields and storage buildings, and an ornate structure that must have been a church. Akin didn't understand the purpose of the building, even though Tino explained to him, but he knew of some of the prayers because Tino taught him. There were men working in the fields, and when they spotted the 4 men arriving, some of them started coming towards them, some men from the houses. Akin could detect a faint scent of an Oankali, but it was very old.
And it's quite interesting, yeah, because there's this whole attempt to understand or attempt to communicate what the function of a church is to Akin, which, that's a pretty... it's a fairly abstract thing to try and explain to an infant, and the explanations that people often have for why there are churches are frequently not actually the explanations for why churches exist in the first place.
I guess, in a way, because it is America, it's I guess there are some people who still remember their old beliefs because they're they're awakened, so and I guess it's necessary for them to have this output in a way.
I think it's also one of those, a sort of strong outward symbol of it. Yeah, I suspect it's also one of those kind of reactionary things, right? It's the defining oneself in opposition to the identity of the other group, right?
Yeah.
If the Oankali don't have religious institutions, then in order to be fully human, we have to have some religious institutions that are like, you saw the same thing in the US in opposition to the Soviet Union.
Yeah,
right? Communism was godless, so the US doubled down on the God stuff, even in things like the Pledge of Allegiance that everyone says in school, right? It's they tacked on the one nation under God bit in the era when they were fighting the communists.
I swear, the whole fact that the kids are doing the Pledge of Allegiance to a flag every morning in school is, for me, is just like, it's crazy. Like, I'm not gonna go into that topic because I don't know enough, and I just feel it's quite weird thing, considering how much.
I think it's one of those. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's kind of a it's a tool that's kind of double-edged. It's you want to use those kind of things carefully, right? It's like any kind of ritualistic behavior. Like you can potentially get useful stuff out of it if it's tied to encouraging you to do something that's actually a useful behavior, or identify with a group more closely, right? So things like making it more difficult to get membership of a group, psychologically speaking, will make you value your membership of the group more after you've joined it, right? So that's the function of some kind of initiation ritual actually has useful psychological consequences for the subsequent membership. And you get the same kind of thing with certain religious rituals, where like if you actually analyze what they're doing at a psychological level, you think, oh, okay, this ritual produces this mental state or this habit of behavior that's actually potentially a useful thing to cultivate. So I think, depending on what exactly it is you're attempting to achieve with the tool of ritual, then it might be a good thing. But like in the case of the Pledge of Allegiance, it does seem a bit overmuch on the the thing we're actually trying to achieve with this is some kind of blind patriotic loyalty. So maybe not.
Yeah. But yeah, let's move on this one. Akin could also smell the women inside of the houses. He could smell their excitement. And the men moved towards the large, well-built, low-stilted house. A tall, lean man awaited them in the shade of the building. So that's the kid.
The section where the women were all in the house, I just wanted to draw that point out because initially, as Akin's moving into the village, he's kind of remarking on the fact that the men are outside and they're working in the fields. They're coming out of the houses and so on. And I think having the women in the houses kind of gives this it's a tiny little chunk in the text, but it gives quite a lot of information about the society in which this town is functioning, right? And also that the society is one that's kind of under stress and frequently in some kind of combat, right? You've got the women kind of being placed in this, in their kind of so-called traditional roles in the house, and you've got men acting in function in defense outside of that. And it couples in with this whole thing of them trading for women.
But to be fair, I mean, yes, that makes sense because, especially if there's a trading with women, like literally as with women were currency. But at the same time, it sort of doesn't make a full sense because, if I may, in old villages, like in villages in old times, men and women worked on the fields equally. There was no, if you had to work on the field, everybody had to go because more often than not, there was just shortage of hands.
That was to some degree why I emphasized the threat, right?
I guess so, yes.
You have men acting in this kind of conventionally combative or defensive role. When there's potential threat of violence, there's new people coming into the village, then that's where you have the men on the outside.
I guess so.
But yeah, it's the fact that we have these quite strongly defined gender roles tells us something about the society that the village is exhibiting. Yeah, there's a lot of reversion to traditional ways of living here. The religion, the gender roles, all of that, and I think that comes back to what we said before about to some degree definition in opposition, definition of identity in opposition to that of the Oankali, right? And they have a confusing set of gender roles, especially because they have a third gender and all the rest of it.
Microbiologist, as someone commented under our video.
The molecular biologist gender, yeah.
But yeah, so continuing on this is an excerpt from a book. So that's the kid, the tall man said. He smiled. He had a short, well-tended black beard and short hair, very black. He wore a white shirt and short pants, displaying startlingly hairy arms and legs. A small blonde woman came from the house to stand beside him. My God, she said, that's a beautiful child. Is there anything wrong with him? Iriarte then puts Akin in her arms and says that he is beautiful except for the tongue. And then we get the introduction of the two people. The two cockroaches, as I wrote down. Gabriel Rinaldi and his wife, Tate. Yeah, there we go. They're back.
They're back.
Once they all moved into the house, Tate gave some food for Akin and drink for the men. I hope you won't wet the floor, she said, glancing at him. Akin responded to her impulsively, said he won't, and that surprised the woman. He originally wanted to speak to the women in seawater, but was afraid that they would be scared of his intelligence. Tate then asks him for his name, age, and if they should buy him. Akin tells her yes, but they want a woman. Tate laughed. Of course they do. We might even find them one. Men aren't the only ones who get itchy feet. But Jesus, 4 men. She'd better have another itchy part or 2.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
And it's interesting that Akin doesn't. He's like, what? Yeah, that kind of goes over his head. That last remark.
Yeah.
He's still ignorant and innocent of certain things about adult organisms. It would seem. No.
But man, honestly, I guess. Well, I guess I guess in the village of their size, maybe they would find someone who had, an itchy part or 2 to go with the men, but still.
Yeah, you'd have to be a brave woman to do that, I think. It's yeah, that'd be putting yourself into a pretty risky situation.
Actually, now thinking about it, do you think STDs exist in the world? Do you think the Oankali have modified the humans so that there's no STDs anymore?
Interesting question. I mean, they still have other diseases, including ones that are.
I mean, like, for example,
largely bacterial.
Yeah,
transmitted.
like ulcers and stuff like that. So technically, if by any chance there is, if this town is like an old town, let's say pre-war town, and I sort of imagine like a cowboy style of towns, there must have been like a brothel or some sort of sorts, right?
I mean, potentially. Well, it sounds like they have a...
Like, just technically, right? Just saying. So, I mean, technically, like, if people, if there's people who would have lots of sex with different partners, both men and women, then technically there's a higher chance of STDs spreading around. Because, I mean, I feel like in the population that's being awakened, unless the Oankali have cured everyone as they awaken them, I mean,
yeah, I suppose it depends what they did with pathogenic bacteria, right? I mean, unless there's some... you'd think that if anyone had an active infection of some kind, they'd probably have cured it when they were releasing them. And it's only stuff that they might have picked up from after the fact. So anything that they encounter, they'd have to encounter some, existing pool of it somewhere else.
Because I feel like, to be fair, humans are nasty, and I feel like at some point I'm sure somebody has stuck their tongue somewhere they shouldn't have, and I feel like they would find some other different weird of infections that shouldn't have been there in the first place. So
yeah, some new origin of some new populations of yeah. I mean, it takes a little while to evolve a new niche and all that, but
I mean, but there's been a few decades now, so since the humans being put on the earth, so who knows if there's one particularly horny person who just decided to stick their junk in somewhere they shouldn't have, and suddenly you get a resurgence of a bacterial or fungal infection that shouldn't have been in the first place there.
Yep. Yeah. A distinct possibility.
Well, anyway, as Richard mentioned, Akin didn't understand what Tate meant, but she just skims over it and then asks him why does he want them to buy him, and he tells her everything about the foreman, about Iriarte and Kalik liking him, Gate hating, and the fact that Damek killed Tino. He then tells her Tino's full name in hope for her to recognize it, and she does, and tells him that his parents are still here. And go on.
The fact that Tino's parents are still there is, I think, going to be relevant for the subsequent interactions with these men.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tate then notices that Akin looks similar to Tino, but Akin tells her that his father is dead. And she then asks if he's sure that Tino was dead. But Akin is saying, like, he says, if no one had heard his screams, then no Oankali would come on time to save him.
So it seems like there's a bit of ambiguity here still in that Akin's leaving in about who his father is in this section, right? Because it's not kind of, I can't remember. Does Akin explicitly say Tina's not his father?
Yes. He says that.
He does.
He says that that his father is dead, but then he then clarifies it. Asks Tate asks Akin if he lied to him, and he confirms that yes, he was literally like a replacement of a father for him. I think later on.
I remember I remember like he served the role as a human father. Yeah, I'd forgotten that section.
And then she tells him that he was loved here, as in Tino was loved there. He was a son that most never got, and she asked if he reached low, because he gave him some food actually. And when Akin confirmed, she asked who was his mother. And this is an excerpt from the book. Lilith Aliapo. Akin did not think she would have liked hearing Lilith's long Oankali name. Son of a bitch, Tate whispered. Listen, Akin, don't say that name to anyone else. It may not matter anymore, but don't say it. Why? Because there are people here who don't like your mother. There are people who might hurt you because they can't get at her. Do you understand? And this is the point when you mentioned earlier, like, Akin being intelligent but ignorant in some innocent in certain things. And this is like the point I feel like if it wasn't Tate who was close to Lilith, then...
Yeah, it's definitely risky of him to mention Lilith's name here.
If it was, for example, Gabriel, I think the boy's head would be popped out like a cork on the champagne immediately.
I don't know. I mean,
I feel that fucking cockroach would be immediately like. It's just, I feel like Gabe still didn't get punched in the face since the book one. And I feel like there has to be some point in the book that the Lilith visits the village, and then there's a face to face again, and good solid 2-3 punches.
Okay.
To be honest, Tate also deserves it, but in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting though, because Tate's been kind of like, she was the one who pointed Tino in the direction of Low.
Yeah,
and is kind of being advising Akin to keep his mouth shut about this. The fact that his mother's Lilith, and she seems to still be a bit, as you said in the notes here, at least have some kind of respect.
Yeah, I think I think the biggest problem for Tate was that she was with Gabriel, right? And it seems that Tate, although initially seemed like a very in the book one, a very independent, strong, like a female character, but eventually it seems that her character was like submerged because Gabriel's character was much stronger, and she sort of became a bit more submissive to him in a way. And so when the whole idea was like, when Lilith was telling them, this is not Earth, you're still on the ship, blah, blah, blah. And then when this whole situation happened, and, all Joseph dying, and then finally Oankali telling them, actually, yeah, this is a ship. And then at the end, she's like, could you tell, so when the message, when she gives message to Nikanj to tell to Lilith that she's sorry. Like, at this point, it's just point. Like, sorry my ass. But, it just shows that, like, her character sort of, changed over time.
Yeah, so when she, paired off with Gabriel, I think maintaining his goodwill in the relationship probably became more important to her than some of this other stuff, even if she feels a little off about some of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like the fact that, that this whole situation took place, I mean, we've discussed it so many times that Oankali took the wrong approach and etc. So there's no point going back to that. But like the whole idea that her character changed, and it seems that Akin was very lucky that he spoke to her, that the fact that there's still this sort of respect and memory of the relationship between her and Lilith.
Yeah, I think he got lucky here in choosing to be as open with Tate as he did. I mean, perhaps he might not have been. I mean, I think there's a section in the description where he gets kind of has a sense that he can be more open with Tate for some reason. So maybe he would have had an opposite intuition had it been someone else.
Yeah.
But it does seem like he got lucky.
Yeah. So after asking Akin, does he understand? Akin tells her that he doesn't, but he believes her. Tate says that they will make sure to buy him no matter what, but Akin tells her that in Siwat, the raiders took him away because they were scared the men from the village would steal him. Tate reaffirms him that she shouldn't worry because she will see to him being bought. Tate then takes Akin to Gabe and the four men. Gabe tells them that the doctor will have to have a look at him. And before that, though, he tells Akin to show him the tongue. This is an excerpt from the book. The man got up and looked for a moment, then shook his head. Ugly. And he's probably venomous. The constructs usually are. I saw him bite an agouti and kill it, Galt put in, but he's never made an effort to bite any of us, Iriarte said with obvious irritation. It's like...
Yeah.
So I don't get...
I could picture this scene quite well.
Yeah,
it's just Galt's
I imagine it as well, but like I sort of don't get Galt. He hates the kid. So in his, like... You would think, like, I hate him, I want to get rid of him as soon as possible. But then he's like, I saw him bite an agouti and kill it. And it's just like, okay, so maybe what if they don't buy it? Don't buy Akin. He's going to be on your hands all the time, and you have the risk of being bitten by Akin all the time. The thing you're fearing is like, I don't think the man is thinking clear.
Yeah, I suppose he's just sort of like, trying to warn other people about him. I suppose he's just a bit... just any chance he can get to say something potentially negative about Akin, he's going to be taking it for some reason. But yeah, I like just Iriarte just like jabbing in the ribs. Shut up, man! We're trying to sell this. Stop undermining the sales pitch.
Iriarte then continues saying that the boy is very intelligent and obedient. Now, what's edible and what isn't? He told them, also mentioned it, like he doesn't like meat and fish, but they shouldn't force him to eat them. But Gabe tells him that he wants to know how unhuman mentally the boy is. Excerpt from the book. Akin did not want to go. Showing his tongue was one thing. Deliberately putting himself in hands that might be unfriendly was another. He looked up at Iriarte, hoping the man would not let him go. Instead, Iriarte put him down and gave him a shove towards Rinaldi. Reluctantly, he edged towards the man. And I think it's understandable because Gabe is an asshole, so he can. I can feel that Akin knows that the guy is an ass. Good job, boy. Well done.
Yep, I know. That's an interesting proposition, right? I wonder if having additional sensory capabilities makes it easier to detect.
Is this person an asshole or not?
Yeah. I mean, you do sometimes get that kind of, you get a vibe, right, from people. The whole, the way they stand, the way they talk,
the way they look at people, or like the first sentence they say, and you can feel like, oh, this guy girl is condescending as fuck. This is not going to be a nice interaction with this person. Might as well leave as soon as possible before it escalates any further. Yeah. It's like the one of the things that always comes to mind when I think of this, of like instantly dislikable people, is the Breaking Bad, the guy who Walt sets his car on fire. It's just like this like stockbroker dude who's just like constantly having unbelievably awful conversations over his Bluetooth headphone, like loudly in public and getting in everyone's way. It's just like this. There's something about the man that's just like, everyone around him clearly loathes him and they don't know anything about him, just other than his immediate demeanor. I mean, it's usually like, but this is an interesting topic because, like, I think we've mentioned this before, but like, in terms of hating someone, right? It's often, unless you experience something, it's quite hard to hate someone. Like, for example, in Harry Potter books, right? the number one hated character in the whole book, and no matter like in any poll you create, it's always Dolores Umbridge. Not Voldemort, not the Death Eaters, because in most cases it's like, oh, Voldemort, he's inherently evil, he kills people, right? Like, but most people like who read the books or never experienced death or someone close to them dying, right? Because of some evil person, right?
Yeah, it's the more relatable.
Yeah, and then you have Dolores
character.
Umbridge, who's just a petty woman who just got a bit of power in her hands, and she's using it, like pushing in any possible direction that like using it and like twisting it so that she can like pretend that the power gives her some rights that she really doesn't have. And we all know a person like that in power, and that they shouldn't have that power because they will like just use it for their petty means, right? And that's why like everybody hates them. So same here, like, you know, like it's the fact that you can sense that like, oh, this person has this bit of extra power in their hands and they're using it in any means just to be like asshole. And
so actually an interesting point on what some of the like watching of interviews with Octavia and reading some stuff that was written about her writing process and so on. Apparently she often started her kind of antagonist characters by modeling them on people she knew or people in like the public eye. So she'd have kind of like a person in mind as like the model for the character. And it was usually either like sci-fi authors who she didn't like and didn't get along with, but like knew from conventions, or like right-wing politicians.
Oh, nice.
So a lot of the times, if there's an antagonist in an Octavia Butler book, you can probably find out if you delved into her archives, like which sci-fi author or which like political figure they were originally based on.
Nice. But to be fair, most people, when they write something, like they base the characters on people they've met, right? Because it's easier to copy someone's behavior than actually reinvent it. Like, how would the person behave when you already know, like, so how would that type of character behave because you already encountered something like that, right?
Yeah, it's good to have kind of a character archetype from which to work. And if you have experience of someone who fits it well, then it's a nice shortcut for running that mental model of what would a person who's like this do.
Exactly. But yeah, going back to the book, Gabe tells him to speak, but Akin looks back at the Iriarte. Gabe then asks for his name, which makes Akin smile because it's the second time that they want to know who he is and not what he is. Akin tells Gabe his name and explains where he's from, where it is from. It's language of Yoruba from Nigeria, meaning hero, but if you put S at the end, it would mean brave boy. Akin he tells them then that he's the first boy born to a human woman, which is interesting. I thought like I like those little things in books when they're like, oh, this is from this and this, and like it's a really nice, interesting fact. Now I can put a Yoruba language that I am basic understanding on my CV.
You made it a bit more than that.
LinkedIn, okay, fluent in African languages.
Yeah, well, there are so many.
Oh god, like it's really funny when you read those like, you know, LinkedIn description of people like, oh yeah, I'm a developer, blah blah, but in reality you can like maybe put a hello world in the Python language. It's like, yeah.
Yes, yeah. I'm a full stack developer. What does that even mean? Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. No, brave boy. Yeah. Okay. That now I'm remembering tales from Ba Sing Se.
Gabe asks him then if he can read, and to which Akin tells yes, because he can remember everything. That startles the four men, and because again Gabe explains to them that that's how Oankali are, and it's an ability that they can give to humans. Gabe then asks Akin if they should buy him, and Akin tells him yes, because they want him sold, while he wants to stay here because it seems that they don't hate him here and he doesn't hate the people from Phoenix. That makes Gabe laugh, which pleases Akin because he was hoping he would make the man laugh. Rinaldi asks his age, the number of languages he spoke, and the purpose of his long great tongue. Akin withheld information only about the tongue. He only tells them that he can smell and taste things with it, but nothing else. When the doctor comes, she notices only texture spots on his back arms and abdomen, but Akin doesn't know if he will grow tentacles when they ask him from them during metamorphosis. Him speaking startles the doctor named Yori. He proceeds to tell them about the sensory spots and the ability to see and taste with them, and the fact that it bothers him if they touch them. Less now, but it still bothers him. The two women...
The little scene with him and the doctor, I thought is quite interesting. That whole little... he's still surprising people by how articulate he is when he speaks. Because it's like people say he talks, and they're like, "Oh, I thought you meant like talk, baby talk, not like he's so eloquent."
Shakespearean English, basically, full on British English accent.
No, that would be an interesting artistic choice whenever you did the translation to some kind of visual medium, right? Like, how do you have him voiced? Because he's still going to have a fairly soft palate. Well, actually, no, not necessarily, right? Because of the whole thing with teeth. Yeah. They mentioned that early on, didn't they?
It'd be really funny if they actually did put like some him started speaking like a Shakespearean English, old English, like just to mess around with people.
Or just give him like a really deep voice. It's just like James L. Jones.
Oh my god, yes, I was just going to say that would be brilliant.
Or like Christian Bale Batman voice. Oh my god. Just like
but yeah.
This is why you don't want us to do the adaptation.
No, you really don't. I think that would be just basically comedy of this whole like, how can you mess with people, just, Yeah, the little boy appears and has a really deep voice.
No, bloopers reel only.
Anyway, then two women come into the room and call Gabe away, and that's when Akin notices a man and a woman who came to have a look at the boy. He realized who they were before they even spoke to him. The woman asks Akin if he knew their son, so Akin tells them that he thinks Tino was killed, unless the Oankali found him fast enough. The man, father of Tino, gets close to Akin and asks him quietly enough for only the women and the doctor hearing the question, asking him who killed Tino. Akin notices that before he answered, the doctor shook her head and her eyes were filled with fear. Akin then tells a lie to the man, saying that the man called Tilden, who died of an ulcer, was the cause. The man confirms with Akin about Tilden being dead and stares at Akin for a long time. Akin could sense that the man loved Tino. How could Akin, even without doctor's warning, send him with his bare hands to face a man who had a gun, who had 3 friends with guns? This is amazing about Akin, which still surprises me. Like, in some cases, he's like, "Oh, Lilith is my mother," and it's like, "Oh, you shouldn't be saying that." And then he doesn't say things because he notices that the man would kill the man. So it's. It's really contradicting sometimes.
He's, a bit patchy on kind of what he's picked up on and on what it is and isn't a good idea to talk about. But yeah, and it is also interesting that he's still, the concern that he has for Tino's father, and even also to some degree for the other 3, right? He's just concerned about the possibility of violence breaking out. And trying to avoid it.
I mean, if he did say that Damek is the real perpetrator, I think that the man would probably jump on his throat straight away. So, to be fair, I wouldn't even think about it if it was the man who killed my son. Like, I just it's a natural event and reaction, and I feel like that Akin made the correct decision not telling the truth.
No, I think it's probably a good move, at least for now. That he's concealing that. Although it does, it's another potential risk, right? Because it's if they find out through other means somehow that it wasn't Tilden who killed him, then it's a breach of their trust.
Yes.
Which puts him in a disadvantageous position because they might not trust other things that he'll tell them.
Speaking of that, here in the book, actually, it says here, Tino fathers nonetheless went to the room with 4 raiders and asked about Tilden. Something in his face made Iriarte put his hand on the gun, Akin noticed, and ironically, Damek, the true cause of Tino's demise, tells him that he died of an ulcer. Iriarte asked the man if he knew him, and Tino's father says that he would like to have met him. Tate looked at Akin. She knew the truth. Tina's mother smoothed back of Akin's hair and asked him who Tina was to the boy, and the boy said that he was a replacement of his dead father. Finally, she kissed him on the cheek and went away. The doctor asked Akin if he told the truth, but Akin decided not to answer. He wished he didn't tell Tate the truth. So Akin already realized, like, damn it, I shouldn't have said to Tate who really killed Tino, because if the truth spreads somehow one way or another, then it's gonna be bad for Akin as well.
Yeah. The doctor's picking up on that as well, and it's
She tells him in this an excerpt from the book, "Never tell them," Yori whispered. His silence had apparently taught her enough. "There has been enough killing. We die and die, and no one is born." She put her hands on either side of his face and looked at him, her expression shifting from pain to hatred to pain to something utterly unreadable. So it was a good decision on his side. And the chapter ends with the doctor hugging him, which made Akin afraid because he thought that she would hurt him due to the amount of suppressed emotion in her. She then went to speak to one of the Rinaldi and left the house, and that's where the chapter ends.
Yeah, it's an interesting little last interaction there, and the doctor goes from kind of expecting a baby to seeing the intelligence in Akin, and then like kind of trying to signal to him to engage in a bit of a deception. It seems in that scene there, where he's like, kind of gives him a head movement to say, don't let on that one of these men is probably the one who killed Tino in front of his parents. And then this last bit here with the pain to hatred to pain to something utterly unreadable, and then the tight, tense hug. So it just feels like that it's there's still a lot of tension, and it's, I guess, understandable. I think it also potentially sets up some queries for this character Yori. We'll learn a bit more about her.
Actually, in the book, we sort of missed this description, but Akin notices that she looks very similar to his dead father, Joseph. So she potentially could be Chinese, but he never goes to ask her, because he says that at the point where when Tino's father asks Akin about whether there's which one of the kill, and she, like, her eyes are so big because of the fear that Akin sort of doesn't have a chance to even speak to her at that point, and so, but potentially Yori though sounds more of a Japanese name. So, but anyway, I think it's interesting, and it's curious what's gonna come up with that, because in a way I sort of feel like this is not the end of the story or between Tino's father and man, but at the same time maybe it is. Maybe Akin's decision, was correct here, and maybe there won't be any violence.
Okay. So on that subject, should we talk about your speculations for the next chapter?
So I think the story will continue, right? Because they still haven't finished the bargain. So I think they will be continuing, like, so maybe, as they did in all times, the bargain, like a party, drinking. But eventually Akin is sold to the village, and it's time to say goodbyes with the men the next morning. Some sweet goodbyes with Iriarte and Kalik. Middle finger to Galt and Damek, and that's the end of the story. And then interaction between Tate and Akin and Gabe and the rest of the village, and Tina's parents will continue, I guess. Okay.
So I suppose a relatively smooth transaction.
I mean, I do hope. I mean, it's sort of, so far there hasn't been, like, Tate said, like, we'll make sure that you are sold, right? We buy you, I mean. And she mentioned like there's definitely some women that definitely are having itchy feet, if not itchy other things. I mean, if you do have an itchy part that shouldn't be itchy, you should see a doctor about that. So everyone, so please make sure that you don't just, go have sexual intercourse if there's itchy parts. That's very bad. But going back to the book, I think, if there was a woman or two that would want to join them, I guess, they might. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like this whole idea still blows my mind. I'm sorry, but it still blows my mind. I just cannot imagine any sentient being just being like, yeah, I'm gonna be sold to like, I mean, obviously it's if like there's forces and you're being forced to do, but like willingly, for men who don't even know hygiene, probably, like.
Yeah, so this particular circumstance, I cannot see the appeal.
There's, I mean, like, I don't know, like,
to go off with
if, as I said, like, if they're, I don't know, like, really well-off men that, like, blah, 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 stuff like that, like, maybe I would see the appeal in it. But, like, if they were handsome or rich or whatever, but there's no appeal whatsoever. Like...
Yeah. So, like, the whole kind of, like, transactional marriage type relationship where, you're going to get something out of it, I can kind of understand why you might enter into that, even if it's not, like an emotional connection, as it were. It's just a business arrangement, effectively, right? That sort of makes sense. But this scenario, I'm not sure what you're getting at.
Yeah, I generally don't.
The other end of the deal here.
It still blows my mind, and I still don't understand why would anybody... I mean, like, even if Tate thinks that there might be some adventurous woman who would want to join them, like, if I just feel like there would be a tension in the group still, like a further tension. Can you imagine, like, if there's a competition between like the men for the lady, and like, for example, the girl decides that actually she likes this man particularly and she doesn't want to, like.
Yeah, I mean, having seen their group dynamics before, it does not look like a healthy situation into which I would be interested in injecting myself.
No, I just feel like this is like really, I would say,
unless you're super desperate, this is not going to be a step
up. No, exactly. Unless you really don't care and you're just like, yeah, well, whatever, let's.
Or like to a degree that's naive.
Yeah.
Frankly. Yeah.
But anyway, I just thought that for me, it's still this whole idea that, that in the world that you have so little people, and it's instead of showing respect to each other and trying to sort of preserve what you can to,
I mean, they kind of are with what they're doing.
Yeah,
in the village,
I mean,
right?
like,
but
the interactions of like, like it's supposed to be like going back to the sort of like the tribal behavior. It's just like, yeah, I mean, not surprised that.
Well, I mean, they're going back to an environment where there's intense scarcity, which drives that kind of decision making and frame. But it's an interesting juxtaposition, right? Because you have the almost post scarcity world of the Oankali, where everything is kind of just available to you from the environment in which you live, right? You live inside a living system that's designed to serve your every like need effectively, and then you've got the humans kind of trying to strive to survive in the environment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that also might have some interesting lines of kind of almost environmental or ecological commentary, right? We're at this point very mismatched with the environment in which we kind of originated in our cultural practices and all the rest of it. But the Oankali are super advanced, but managed to be so in a way that is not out of harmony with the biology of the worlds that they kind of create for themselves. To some degree, although the whole resource stripping the planet slowly through a biological process is somewhat like contrary to that, but also somewhat in line with what biology does anyway.
True,
It's
true.
like, yeah.
But I still, it's just for me, like, it's a weird concept, and I feel like if we were in this world, I would probably be the first one to die, because I would be like, we are literally going back to savage times. I refuse in any circumstances to be part of any of this fucking nonsense and this sort of behavior. So yeah, but anyway.
Mm-hmm. No, and as we've said before, I've
you already decided where you're gonna be. Yeah,
I'm up on the spaceship. Well. Okay then, so I think that
I guess that's
more or less wraps up the
yes.
episode.
Thank you very much everyone for listening. We are Xenothesis. You can find all the places we upload our podcast on xenothesis.com. I was Michael Glinko.
I was Richard Acton.
Bye.
Goodbye.